I'm Max Sterling, welcome to LarpGasm. Today on the show we're going to mod one of these Nerf Bowstrikes and make it genre appropriate for a medieval fantasy LARP. A buddy of mine actually made one of these for his daughter who plays at the game, and I liked the way it looked, but I think I'm going to take it a little bit further than what he did, and I'm going to debadge it, paint it, and look at the internals and do some other things to it, and really make it an awesome little blaster for a backup. I have some larger crossbows that shoot Nerf darts or arrows, but they're all so big it's kind of hard for me to run around with them, especially since I dual wield at this particular game. So having just something small that I can grab in case someone's running, I don't feel like chasing them, or being able to hit someone on the other side of the room. It's not always easy to throw or something like that, so sometimes having something covert like this is nice. And if you've never seen these bow strikes, they actually open up and deploy, so these little side things flip out and it looks just like a little crossbow. I already know some problems are going to be this, that you have to pull back to cock it, and of course the trigger's always a hassle to paint, but I have some ideas for those. This particular game does not require orange tips. If your game requires the orange tips, then you can just leave the orange tip on there, but my game doesn't require it, so we're going to go ahead and change it. So let's go ahead and open it and take a look. I found this one at a big toy store. I'd actually been looking around for them for a while and finally found one. You can see as soon as you pull it back, those little arms come out, and this also pops up. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep that or not. I guess I should see how far it shoots. I'm actually pretty impressed with the distance. I hit my wall. It's probably about 30 feet away, and it still hit with some force. I apologize for the screen size here, but this is the only camera I had available where I was. So you'll start by taking these couple screws out. There's only a few of them that come out very easily compared to some other Nerf blasters. The internals are very simple. You have your barrel, you have the mechanism for making the bow sides flip out and that targeting thing on top flip up. You know, you got your air chamber, your plunger, your trigger, and then there's one other little piece, and that's it. So very simple. That targeting mechanism, you know, I'm going to alter somehow, and we'll have to see what I do with it. But for now, you take this out, make sure you make a note of how these pieces are in here. It's a pretty simple system, but I know a lot of times I get too quick on the draw. I pull these pieces out and I forget how they go back in, so this is always a good reference to have. Now, really, the only mod you're going to do on this are some of the simple free mods that you're used to doing on other Nerf guns. So this air chamber, it just comes right apart. Pretty simple stuff. So you can see there's just these tabs, and once you pop them, and I mean I did this just with my hand, the air restrictor will come right out. There's your spring, there's your air restrictor. Same as other Nerf. Just pull that right out. And inside there is where your peg is that your dart sits on. So if you want to take that off, this piece just comes right out. And all you got to do is just either cut that off or snip it off, or I usually just bend them back and forth until they break off right at the base. And once they break off, you know, you can clean them up if you want to, but you certainly don't have to. You can just break it off and just leave that little tiny nub at the bottom. It's probably not going to affect anything, but you know, if you want to clean it up with some sandpaper, you can, which I did. And then once it's cleaned up, you know, just put it back together. This is a very simple setup, slides right back together. In fact, if you know you're never taking this apart again, just to make sure that it stays airtight, you may want to try to glue this together or seal it in some way. I didn't, but just sort of an afterthought, just to keep that chamber sealed a little bit tighter. But like I said, I was pretty happy and impressed with the shooting distance before doing any of this stuff. So this is an optional step on this weapon. I thought it shot pretty well without anything done to it. Once you have your mods done, you can pull the pieces out if you want to. So if you're painting and you want to keep the tip orange, that whole tip comes out, just set that aside and don't paint it. It's that easy. Paint everything else and then put it back together and just put that tip right back in, and you have a nice orange tip, and you know, it looks professional. If my game or my state required that orange end on there, then I would just, you know, leave that as is. I mean, basically, the step is pull everything out, get ready for paint. If you want to do it this way, that's up to you. So then these sides come off very easily. Just push up on these little prongs, and these sides just pop right out. I'm actually amazed I didn't break this while I was doing this, but it seemed pretty simple to do. And then that allows you to paint those without getting anything on the actual body of it. So just how I like to do it. You don't have to do that. If you're an excellent painter and have a steady hand, then you can skip the part where you take these off. However, if you plan to run a string like I did, you're going to want to take that off. I plan on using this caulking to actually fill in the holes in the grip of the gun, to fill in the grip. Now, the important part is adding the string to make it actually look like a bow, so it doesn't have these little flip out things, so it looks like a PKE meter. We want it to look like it has bow strings. So we're going to drill some little holes. If you look on these arms, there's actually little holes on there from where the plastic was probably broken off of, you know, at the factory, how they assemble them. So I'm just going to drill right through that hole, because that way I have a reference on both sides, so I know they're even and they're in the same place. And just use a very small bit. Take your time, you don't want to break anything. And just get your small little hole in there. It just needs to be big enough that we can run a small piece of string or elastic string or twine or bowstring or piano string or whatever you want to put in here. I'm actually going to use elastic because it has a little bit of stretch and it'll look nice and tight whenever those little arms flip out. So now that you have that done, we're going to do the same thing on these slides for the side. Drill the holes towards the back. You want it to line up with where that's going to rest. Luckily, this has an indentation in it, so you can line it up pretty easily and just drill your hole right through there. Now that step is optional. You don't have to put this hole in here. You could actually just run it underneath or over, but if you do, those sides may not fit back on there exactly right. So I chose to actually drill the holes through it. And you can see at the end, and you can make your own judgment on how you want to do this. But I need this thing to be somewhat sturdy because I plan to use it for LARP quite a bit, and I don't want it coming apart on me. I don't want to just glue things to the side or whatever. You could also use probably like little eyelet screws and stuff like that, you know, entirely up to you, but I wanted it to look as realistic as possible. And of course, next step is paint it. That initial black that I painted, this is actually a vinyl, an interior dye, and then from there I'm going over it with brown to try to give it a wood grain. Now my wood graining tool is way too big for this, so I'm giving it sort of a poor man's wood grain, and basically all that is you put down one shade of brown, put another shade on top of it, and with a gloved hand or whatever you may have on you, just sort of rub the paint. The thing with wood grain is make sure that you go in one direction, and you know, you want to rub a lot of it off because it needs to be subtle. I chose to make this really dark, obviously, because almost everything I have is black. You can choose lighter colors if you want it to look more like wood. That rear piece, I put some hockey grip tape on because it looks like cloth, and if I painted that, the paint's just going to come off. And you can see how that looks when I open. And so this is the finished product. You can see that I cut this down to make it more aggressive looking. We still have these to open. We got our string, and of course we have our paint job, and we have our sort of wood grain with the metal on top. We got our hockey grip tape on the back. I don't particularly like this style of setup, but the hockey grip tape works best. You only want to run it to the end so it doesn't interfere with the mechanism, and then just paint the inside of it if that bothers you, or Sharpie it in. This still needs to get filled with caulking, but I wanted to wait until I was completely done, because once I caulk that, this won't be opening up again to doing sort of internal stuff. And I'm just going to paint over it, or maybe suede wrap it. I have a little bit of suede left over from my Maker's Challenge, that sword that I made, and I think that would look good. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it, aside from I'm going to add a little red gem right in there, because I think that little bit of color would make this look just really awesome. And you know, I think give it a little bit more of that fantasy angle. And you may ask, you know, your LARP lets you use something like this? Well, yeah, I mean, I didn't make the LARP. They allow this stuff. It's a 1 point item, and yeah, I mean, if they're going to allow it, then I'm going to make one. I think that my Diamondista and my Code Breaker I have hanging on my wall over there, and you've probably seen the videos for those, I think that they look much more realistic and better, even though they use the same dart. But hey, you know, it is what it is. If they allow it, I'm going to use it. So that's pretty much it. Since I play a low-key sort of covert person, you know, this would be great. Keep this in a pocket, make a little holder for it, and someone tries to run away, you know, I'm sitting in the tavern and we want to play a Han versus Greedo type of moment, you know, whatever we want to do, you know, I have this, and you know, it's a little bit more discreet than throwing something, so that's why I decided to make it. And yeah, I think it turned out real well. I hope that you agree. If you decide to make one of these, then, you know, I hope it works out for you. Feel free to post about it. I'd be interested to see pictures or know how it turned out for you. And if you play like a gnome or a dwarf, or I don't know, maybe like a vampire hunter or something like that, this may be really awesome for you. And like I said, I think it was a fun little project. And these are pretty cheap. Like I said, I think this was like $8, but they were a buy one get one free or something deal at the store I was at. So really good deal. I actually have a second one I'm probably going to do the same thing with, but make it a lighter wood grain. So I hope you liked this video. If you did, please click like. Please subscribe to my channel. And if you really enjoy what I do, consider supporting me through Patreon. And yeah, as always, adventure on. So you may feel like on some of these videos I avoid certain words. Well, you'd be correct. YouTube, man, not a fan of free speech. So, but you know what this is, so you can put two and two together.